right, everyone, we're going to get started. Good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight to our 7th DARA Forum. My name is Lynn Truskowski, and I represent not only Keystone Center, but Key Recovery in Delaware County, and I'm a part of the DARA group. So many volunteers to thank for tonight's success, and we hope we haven't forgotten anyone, but we'd like to thank Scott Rowland, our wonderful videographer, Gina Myers, our incredible photographer, Roger Hammond, our website expert at www.darasaveslives.com. We are making exciting, comprehensive updates to the site, so please check it out soon. We'd also like to thank Wegmans and Danielle Terrioni, as well as Manna on Main Street and the North Penn PAL for refreshments tonight. And we'd like to thank especially Bob Varga and his staff here at the North Penn YMCA for allowing us to host the event. Thank you, Bob. We also want to thank Robert Oldfield and Kaleo for the naloxone training and supply, Representative Steve Malagari for the DARA signage and this forum, and to Amy Gilrain of ANG South Creations for producing the DARA signs at her cost, but also helping us with DARA t-shirts. So please like and share our Facebook page, which is the Drug Addiction Resource Alliance, and thanks to Mark Rezanetsky for all of his assistance. Did you also know that we are also on Instagram and Twitter, thanks to Greg Gilrain? And Greg is also in charge of sign placement throughout our community. We're always looking for volunteers, so if anybody is looking to join the DARA group, please let us know. You can help out with a variety of volunteer things such as signage. You can help us with social media, getting the word out about forums, and other things on our list. Feel free to help us create DARA and be more creative. That's all right. You're at least a Thomas-Laury. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. So our email address is darasaveslives@gmail.com. Please email us if you want to become a member. Also, if you want to offer your professional services in some way, post a sign, or wish to speak with us. We also have clipboards at the DARA table to sign if you would like to be notified of our next DARA event, our member meetings, post signs, and more volunteer opportunities. Even if you filled one out in the past, please fill it out again, as we're constantly updating our, what's the word I'm looking for, database. So without any further, well, okay, maybe not. So let me introduce Judge Andrea Duffy, the reason we are all here tonight.
I have always cherished living, working, and raising our children in this community. But tonight, I have never been prouder of the support, caring, and power of the North Penn community. Thank you. We are all here to prove that no one has to die from addiction in our community or in any community. On display right here is the powerful village mentality that together, and only together, we can conquer the stigma and the deadly epidemic of addiction. I began DARA in 2016 with the help of my 2 police departments in my jurisdiction, Hatfield Township and Montgomery Township, and Attorney Greg Gifford. We were quickly grasping that those individuals charged with drug-related offenses either weren't appearing for their first hearing, or if they did appear, they were begging for inpatient treatment. I too was frustrated that there was so much delay and so many obstacles in getting them the life-saving help that they desperately needed. As the local district judge, I was the first official they would see fresh off the arrest, so I knew I had this golden opportunity to assist them right there and then, before they went back on the streets or languished in prison without the treatment they so deserved. I take a personal approach with each individual in my court, and thanks to my DARA contacts, especially Hope Stein. Where's my Hope? Where is she? There she is. I always say that Hope Stein is aptly named because she is my hope. I call her morning, noon, and night. Get up here, girl. She is the reason so many lives have been saved in this community. I call her whenever I have a need. And so we do talk a whole lot. But she always keeps picking up the phone when she sees my number, and I don't know why sometimes, because I'm really just always begging and desperate, and she always comes through. She does amazing work, and so the real hero of the night is Hope Stein. So thank you again. So many of the providers here today are people I call on and make contacts for the people in my court. Resources are everything, and we have some great resources here tonight. So, let's see here. I guess I can pretty much say, even though we haven't taken strict statistics, DARA since 2016 has probably helped a couple of hundred people get into treatment right from the bench, and I can't be prouder. So with the assistance of many agencies and groups, I've been so grateful to get off the bench and see firsthand the many dynamics of addiction and the recovery process, so I can better understand this horrible epidemic and relate to the people and connect to them better in my courtroom. So many of the defendants I see would not be there and interacting with police but for their need to fuel their addiction. I'm so grateful to Narcotics Strike Force in Philadelphia, Angels in Motion, various facilities, parent groups, 12-step programs, and many, many patients for teaching me so much and allowing me to observe the many stages, the terminology, and the horrible effects of addiction. I thank the members of DARA from all walks of life for supporting our work and our mission to stop this plague. And based on Montgomery County statistics, and I know we have Judge Eisenberg here and Steve Malagari, our representative, we know from those statistics that in Montgomery County, we are succeeding. We have a lot of hope here, and we're doing so well. With all of that said, DARA has no political or religious affiliations, but we humbly recognize that we need all the help we can get. So we invite all groups to support our mission. We often begin with our presentations with an invocation, and we welcome any faith leader to volunteer for future forums. Just please send us an email. Tonight, Father Muka from the Great Mary Mother of the Redeemer, where I go, they've also hosted a forum, but he is here to lead us in a brief invocation. So welcome, Father.
So as part of my prayer this evening, I'll use one of the Psalms from the Old Testament. Our Jewish brothers and sisters would be familiar with this, but it's part of the church's prayer. And then I'll also make the sign of the cross as a reminder to all of us of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who died for our sins that we might have life. So we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Happy the man whose offense is forgiven, whose sin is remitted. Happy is the man to whom the Lord imputes no guilt, and whose spirit is no guile. I kept it secret, and my frame was wasted. I groaned all the day long. For night and day your hand was heavy upon me. Indeed, my strength was dried up as by the summer's heat. But now I have acknowledged my sins. My guilt I did not hide. I said I will confess my offense to the Lord. And you, Lord, have forgiven the guilt of my sin. Heavenly Father, we ask that all those who are currently in recovery may continue that journey of recovery, and pray for all those who may be in any form of suffering from any form of substance abuse. We pray that they may acknowledge their offense, that they may come to the light with their problems, and to find that healing from you. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. So please let us know, an imam, a rabbi, a pastor, anyone. I'd love to have you at future DARA forums to lead us in prayer, because like I said, we can use all the help we can get. All right. I want to thank our first speaker very much for jumping on board with DARA. He hadn't even been sworn in yet, so he hit the ground running and offered to host this forum with me here at the Y in his jurisdiction, and we couldn't be prouder to have him on board. So here to speak with you is Representative Stephen Malagari.
Thank you, Judge Duffy. Everybody here, this is amazing to see so many people come together collectively to try and find a good resolution to this issue of addiction and drug and alcohol substance addiction that we have in our community. It touches every life, either directly or indirectly. We all know somebody who has struggled or is currently in treatment or recovering and is successful with that, going through addiction. So it's prideful to me to be here in Lansdale actually talking about this in this facility where we have 4 really great nonprofit organizations that came together under one roof and allowing us to be able to have this forum here today. I wanted to just talk a little bit about one personal incident that happened in my life that dealt with addiction. It was alcohol addiction, and it was a coworker of mine actually who went to prison, lost his entire family, lost everything because of his alcoholism, and ended up coming back to work and relapsed once. And when he relapsed that day, he came back and we said, what was going on? We were trying to contact the individual, and he said, I started drinking again. And I said, okay, we're going to AA, and I'm going to take you. And we went that day, and that day he found a sponsor. And since that day, this man has been sober. So this was about 6 years ago. So now I still keep in contact with him, thank you. And it was just a natural response. Luckily, where we were, there was a clubhouse close by, and we were able to take him and support him through this entire process. It was a really good way to give back to that individual, and he's been a good friend ever since. But that's just one thing. But families across our nation and our Commonwealth continue also to be touched by this opioid epidemic. In Pennsylvania, 1 in 4 families are grappling with the substance abuse problem, according to the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. Statistics provided by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency have also shown that overdose deaths grew by more than 30% in 2016. We're starting to see a little bit downplaying that now. It's starting to go down, which is good. These startling statistics, however, are more than just numbers. They reflect the lives lost and families torn apart by the crisis. Beyond families, the strain impacts our emergency rooms. It impacts our court system. And it also impacts everything as we struggle to treat substance abuse patients, direct recovery efforts, and hold people accountable for the crisis. Last year, Governor Tom Wolf declared a statewide disaster emergency over the heroin and opioid epidemic. This disaster declaration was issued to speed up and expand access to treatment, improve tools for families and first responders to save lives, and enhance coordination and data collection to improve state and local response. So our efforts do not stop. We are committed to leading Pennsylvania from addiction to recovery. I'm committed in the House with my colleagues to make sure that we find a resolution to what's going on with this epidemic, to make sure that we can finally find a stop to it and help many of these individuals who don't ask for this. A lot of them fall into it through life, and a lot of it's against their own will. A lot of this came from a physician giving a prescription and an individual becoming addicted to that medication. Our physicians are the ones that we trust the most, and they're the ones that have the most intimate details of our life. And we need to make sure that we're able now to, unfortunately, we have to go back to our physicians and say, please, you have to work with us. And our drug manufacturers, you have to work with us. We can't continue going down this path any longer. So I thank you for allowing me to say a few words this evening. I thank you for this huge show of support for DARA, and I look forward to working with DARA in the future, and with every other forum coming up, I plan to be a part of that one. So thank you so much.
Okay, next, our wonderful chief in Lansdale, we have Chief Trail.
Good evening. My name is Mike Trail. Currently, I'm the chief here in Lansdale. First, I want to welcome everybody to Lansdale on behalf of the borough and the police department. It's great to see so many people here. We're very honored to have the program here and a lot of very great attendees. I told you I'm the chief. I've been in law enforcement for 28 years, and a lot of my time was spent combating narcotics and the plague of it. One of the things I also share, unfortunately, is I'm also the parent of a daughter in recovery who's been so for a number of years now. So as I look out across this room and the families who are here to support their loved ones and to gain the value of the Narcan training and to get the information recovery centers, I can identify with you because I've been there. My wife and I have lived it for the past 8 years. And it's a very difficult thing. And it really gives me a lot of strength in my heart to know that the community of Lansdale is here to support one another. And that's what each of you are doing here tonight. You are here to support all of us. And I, as a parent of a daughter in recovery, cannot thank you enough. As a police officer, I can tell you that the majority of property crime that we see every day is a result of addicted individuals trying to get property for money for drugs. And one of the things that we know is that, unfortunately, until such programs that existed, it was a vicious cycle. Persons of addictive behavior were getting arrested, they were doing time in jail, they were coming back out, they were reoffending, and they were going back. And I want to thank Judge Duffy for recognizing that, because I believe that you're one of the first judges on the local level down here. I know Judge O'Neill down at County Court has done a lot, but you're the first person to see these individuals and recognize that. So I want to applaud you for everything you've done. Most of our addicted loved ones did not get there overnight. This plague will not end overnight. It will take a lot of resolute behavior on our parts and love and support. I will tell you that my department stands ready to assist those people when we can. And I believe if we can break the cycle of addiction, get people into treatment, take them out of a life of offending, we can also reduce crime and create a better quality life for our residents. And I'm thankful that we're here together and you have my support to do this together. Thank you very much.
And I think Bob Varga, who is the executive director of the Y, just wants to welcome you all.
I have to say this is a wonderful, wonderful turnout tonight. I can't thank Andrea enough for what she has done for this. The North Penn Commons here is a collaboration of 4 nonprofits. We have the Y, we have Man on Main, we have the Peak Center and Advanced Living. And it's just a wonderful event that we're having here tonight, and I can't thank everyone enough for coming out tonight and supporting this. Thank you.
Bob and the entire staff here at the Y have just been wonderful, so we are so, so grateful. All right, well, with our first speaker, when she called me on my cell phone last week, I have to admit I got a little starstruck, and I started stuttering, I admit it, because even though my parents will all tell you that I grew up saying I wanted to be a judge, I also grew up wanting to be Lisa Thomas-Laury. It's true. I mean, she is so beautiful, so gracious, so articulate, so intelligent. And it was just unbelievable to me that on the other end of the phone was the person who had been speaking to me through my entire, childhood, telling me the news. And she was talking to me personally. So I just couldn't believe it that, I was hearing that wonderful and much loved familiar voice. I am about halfway through the book, which is wonderful. But I think even though she needs no introduction, I'm just going to say a couple of words. Lisa Thomas-Laury began working at WPVI TV Channel 6, the ABC affiliate here, as a reporter and co-anchor of Action News in 1978 at the age of 24. She covered the stories of everyday people and all around the region, and has interviewed countless stars, countless politicians, countless celebrities. And she's going to tell you her story of recovery, so I'm certainly not going to touch on that right now. But I will say, what we may not know is that she's received 3 honorary doctorate degrees and numerous other awards, including an Emmy for public affairs documentary on Philadelphia neighborhoods in the 1980s, and the city's most prestigious accolade, the Liberty Bell Award. She retired, yes. She retired in May of 2016 after a second bone marrow transplant, having spent nearly 4 decades with WPVI TV. I am so proud and so honored to introduce to you Lisa Thomas-Laury.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Sure, no problem, Bob. I love to speak to groups like this because, since writing the book, I've been on a little bit of a tour, and I took a break because I had my first grandson, and he's adorable. My son, his dad is back there. But I come out, and I must tell you that I really never planned to write a book. I certainly didn't plan on being as forthcoming, as transparent as I was ultimately. But both my sons, Langston's back here helping me with the book, and especially my son Leland, my baby boy, kept bugging me after I retired. Mom, you've got to write a book. When are you going to write a book? When are you got to get started on that book? And I'm thinking, as a mother, here's my son that thinks it's cool to write a book. That's what he expects the next thing to be. And I really didn't want to write a book. And one day we were sitting down on the sofa, and he said, Mom, I'm really serious. You don't understand how many people you could help. He was home. My older son was at college, and Leland was home in high school, so he saw all the tough stuff. He saw how hard it was for me to overcome things. He saw the paperwork that I had to fill out. He was there when I went through the addiction to OxyContin. He knew what I had to learn painfully and what I could share. And he's always been that type of kid. And it was then that I decided, well, maybe there's something to this. Part of the reason I hadn't considered it before was because, frankly, I didn't want to relive some of that tough stuff. And it turned out to be therapeutic, writing the book. It turned out to be a real joy and much more beneficial to me than I thought. But let me start by telling you that my story actually begins in a little town in Institute, West Virginia. I was born in Washington, D.C., but we moved there so that my father could finish his college education when I was about 7, and I've always called it home. Institute, West Virginia. Population about 2,800, unincorporated. Chemical Valley. It was known as Chemical Valley because on one side of our home was the carbide plant, the carbide chemical plant. On the other side was DuPont. And it wasn't uncommon for us, me and my 3 brothers, to experience growing up small little chemical explosions and water turning brown, and we'd get on the bus to go to school. On our way, we'd see this yellow powder on the lawn. So these little accidents, along the way. And even though Institute was a wonderful place to raise your children as far as the camaraderie with other kids and families, we all had to wonder what that brown stuff that was eating the enamel on our tubs was doing to our skin and our teeth and our insides. I mention this because later it would play a role in the mysterious illness that I would be stricken with before I turned 50. But that was where I developed a passion for writing. and doing anything that had to do with literary and producing. I used to produce plays, school plays in the 3rd grade. And if you check out my banner back there, that top picture is me in the 3rd grade. And I love to write. And there was one play that the principal allowed me to put on one evening for the 3rd and 4th grade students and their parents and families. And my head was in the clouds. I was so excited. I would cast myself in the leading role, of course, and cast my classmates in supporting roles. And I remember after that first play, The Red Shoes, the thunderous applause, how much that meant to me and how excited I was, but no one's applause meant more and no one's praise meant more than my father's. I was the only girl, and I was Daddy's girl, and he could do nothing wrong. Well, that passion for writing took me to Dunbar High School, but before then, about a year after that wonderful evening where I put on my school play, I made a discovery about my family that totally blindsided me. I had no knowledge of. And that was that this father that I adored and did adore until his death was an alcoholic. And it had gotten worse. I was too young before then to understand the 6-month periods where he'd be on the job, and then the 6 months he'd be off the job, and the strange behavior and the arguments. But it started to worsen. And I started to learn a little bit about addiction at that early age. Back then, unfortunately, it was considered more a weakness. Few people understood that it was a disease until my mom and I took him for help. And I would even talk to the doctors as the only girl and the oldest child and learn more and more about it. But being at that impressionable age, a teenager, and the peer pressure, it was hard to forgive sometimes. And I can remember being resentful and wondering why this man that I adored had to turn out this way. I can remember one day he came down into the living room and was angry about something, probably the most frightening time growing up. And he pulled out a gun and pointed it at all of us and shot into the living room table. And when the bullets splintered the wood, we all screamed and huddled together, and I remember my mother just being strangely calm. And I remember being angry that she wasn't furious, angry that she wasn't trying to get him out of there, but she wanted to assure us that everything was going to be okay. And I remember taking comfort in that. I was on the school bus one day. We would pick up we were the Institute kids, and we would pick up the West Dunbar kids along the way. And I remember this one particular Monday afternoon, and there was some snickering and talk, and I remember looking over where everyone was looking against the fence at a man who was sort of crumpled against the fence, his head bowed, and obviously had either been drunk or passed out. And a closer look let me know that was my dad, laying over there, who knows how long it had been. And I just held my head up and continued on, and my closest girlfriend knew of the situation. And when we would go home, we would always watch a soap opera. Anybody here remember Edge of Night? That was our soap opera. We'd go in, and if he were there, if he had been drinking, we'd step over and get our sandwich and sit down and watch. But those memories were often painful, but it was an introduction to something that I would later have to deal with again. In school, I think what helped me with it was focusing on the work and that love of writing. I became editor of the high school newspaper. When it came time to go to college, we had West Virginia State College, an all-black college at the time. But it was, I could walk across to the campus, and I didn't want to go there because I wanted the college experience. I wanted to be able to travel a little bit, live in one of the dorms. We didn't have the money for that. My father wasn't working regularly. My mother said we simply can't manage it financially. So I heard about a scholarship, a journalism scholarship, and my aunt said, you should try for that. You should, try out for that. So I did. I applied, submitted some of my work, and was guaranteed that first freshman year when I won that scholarship. I went down to Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. And I remember the year that I went. It was after Marshall had experienced, I think, the worst sports tragedy in NCAA history. We lost our entire football team. You probably remember We Are Marshall, the movie that was made for it. I knew some of those guys because I had been to early orientation. And that whole experience had set a pall over the campus. But they also united us in a strange way, and they were very productive years. At the end of my freshman year, that little scholarship I had won ran out. And I needed to get a second job. I needed some money. An upperclassman friend told me about a weather position where I could try out to be a weather girl. Now, I was majoring in print media. I wanted to be a magazine writer. But I thought, wow, this is still broadcasting journalism. Let me try this. I went down an audition, got the weather position. Now, mind you, we were not meteorologists back then. All we had to know was the low pressure system and the high pressure system, and we had to stand real cute and be able to point and know the 50 states. So on the weekends, throughout the rest of my time in college, I was the weather girl. There are some write-ups that say I was the first African American, and I just want to set the record straight. The first African American weekend weather girl in Institute, West Virginia, was a young lady who was at Marshall for 6 months as an exchange student, and her name was Adrienne Belafonte. She was the daughter, somebody clapping back there? She was the daughter of Harry Belafonte, of course, the actor and activist. So, but it was great learning for me. It was great learning. I probably didn't take it as seriously as I should at the time because it interfered too much with my sorority and my weekend fun. And so it wasn't uncommon for me to come on the weekend weather with a halter top after swimming, or I had a big wrap in my hair, and when I crossed from my sorority, I had a big clunky jewelry on, and got to the point where my mother was afraid to watch. She wouldn't watch me do the weather anymore. But it was a wonderful time. By the time I was ready to graduate, I had asked to do a stint that summer in news. And that's when I developed the bug for journalism, being a reporter. And because of that, I had the experience, and also because the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, had cracked down on station to hire women and to hire minorities, I had 8 offers. Pensacola, Florida, Kentucky, little stations here and there. The one I chose was Oklahoma City, which was pretty far away. But my mother had a cousin in nearby Norman. Someone was there to watch over me if I needed it. I had interviewed at Kentucky, and I remember there was a woman there, blonde, very attractive blonde lady, who was interning to be the weather girl there, and she was asked to show me the ropes a little bit, and her name was Diane Sawyers. So she was starting as a weather gal too. But I went to Oklahoma, didn't like it one bit. It was so flat, didn't have any green trees, anything that I was used to. Half the newsroom smoked peyote, and it was just something to get used to. But I did learn the nuts and bolts of television news there. Back then, we worked in pairs, and I paired up with a tall young man named Dave Smith, and we had a CP16 camera. He'd put it on his shoulder and shoot my story, and I'd return the favor and put that big 9-pound CP16 on my shoulder, shoot his story. We would go back to the station, retreat to a closet-like room, and literally splice and glue our stories together, our film, and then add the audio. So I was really learning every aspect of the business. I know that the general manager in West Virginia had told me to try to stick it out for a year. But when Nashville, Tennessee called, I really wanted to go. So he said, well, if you get that job, you're in the 37 market, this is 33, it's a step up, you should take it. I went down for the interview, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed in the hotel room, and I turn on this TV to see what this station is like. And lo and behold, something I had never seen before. A black woman was anchoring the news solo. And I stared and I watched and I thought, wow, she looks to be about my age. I couldn't be sure. And what did strike me was how confident she was, how articulate and poised, her voice. And so I said, when I go in the morning, I sure hope I get to meet her. Went in the next morning, was escorted over to sit in front of Chris Clark's office, the news director, and saw that young woman that I'd seen the night before in the corner. So I said, I hope I have enough time. I moseyed on over to the corner, and I said, I just had to come over and tell you how impressed I was. What a wonderful job you did last night when I was watching. My name is Lisa Howard. She says, well, how are you doing? You're a tall drink of water. My name is Oprah Winfrey. So I learned later that Oprah, we were both 19 years old. The year was 1954. I'm sorry, we were born in 1954. The year was 1974. Anyway, she was designated to show me the ropes, and I went out with her that day and shadowed her on her stories. We were doing live shots then. In fact, that station was the first to do live shots around the country, WTVF in Nashville. And I learned that Oprah was about to hopefully get a job in Baltimore, co-anchoring the primetime news. And she was telling me about Nashville and how I should love it. I told her my mom had graduated from Fisk, and I thought I would like it just fine with Meharry there and the Grand Ole Opry and Vanderbilt. And so I did stay 2 years, and Oprah and I stayed in touch, and she went on to Baltimore. 2 years later, I got a call from Philadelphia. And I remember the talent scout saying, come up, do the audition. I came up, and I knew they liked me. I knew I had done a good job. But the talent scout called me back before they gave me the final okay to say that they wanted me, but there was one condition. I was Lisa Howard. They had a Mark Howard. They didn't want to be any confusion. So would I mind changing my name? I said, sure. I decided to take my mother's maiden name, which was Thomas. So I became Lisa Thomas, and I was starting to work there. It was a little tough those first few months. And I was paired, thankfully, with a guy who would just be a godsend, who took me under his wing when they were complaining about my Appalachian accent. My hair was too thick, and I was bungling names like Conshohocken and Bala Kenwood and Punxsutawney Phil. He helped me. Around that time, they were also looking for a morning talk show host. And they found a guy named Dave Thomas up in Buffalo. They said, Dave, we love you, but we've got a Lisa Thomas. And it'll be confusing if you remain Dave Thomas. So could you pick another name? Dave was used to ethnic names not always being successful in his career. in the industry. So he picked Roberts. And we went on from there. But Jim was such a wonderful, wonderful asset to me when I was going through those rough days. And one day, they were bugging me about something, and in a way that only Jim O'Brien could. He said, blank them. I'm serious. Blank them and pay attention to what you're doing. You're a good news reader. Get them out of your head, and you'll be fine. So we worked on all those names I was mispronouncing. They sent me over to a hairdresser who thinned my hair. Oh, God. It took 2 years to get my hair to look right the way I wanted it again, but I had that perfect little anchor bob. And they got a speech tutor for me at Temple University. I still remember her name, Julia Wing. And she taught me how to talk and deliver the news from my diaphragm and speak, have a universal dialect. And she was very helpful. She did mention that there were quite a few other people at the station that could use her help, but she would work with me. So it was all good. It was all good. It was all good till 1983. And we all got the news that Jim O'Brien was killed in a skydiving accident. I'm sure most of you, many of you know about that. And it struck us like it would any family. We were devastated. Yeah, so was the community. Many of us remember where we were on that day. As I thought about it later, it was a watershed moment for me. I took over the anchor desk with Jim's job with Mark Howard. I did the parades with Dave Roberts. And the next 20 years were pretty idyllic. Were pretty good. But it was in 2001 when that all changed. I was at the height of my career. I was in the best health. And I started to experience very unusual, mysterious symptoms in my extremities, my legs and feet. And they started to get weaker when I would power walk with the young woman who was a trainer who was working with me. And I did what most professional women would do initially, I think. I ignored it. I was just too busy. But then my husband, being a doctor, said, you really need to see a neurologist, get an ENG, a nerve conduction study. And so I did. And it showed that I had indeed lost about 30% of the strength in my legs and feet below my kneecaps. We didn't know why. So we continued to pursue, we continued to go to doctors. I went to a mentor and a friend of his, Dr. Edgar Kenton, who was at that time chief of neurology at Lankenau Hospital. One day, a test, he told me he thought I had a very rare, unusual disease, a blood disease called Poems syndrome. Poem, like the rhyming poem, an acronym. P for polyneuropathy, O for organomegaly, meaning you have enlarged organs, E for the endocrine system. I later developed hyperthyroidism. M was the blood, monoclonal gammopathy. Most of us, I should say, should have about 250 to 400 platelets in our blood. Mine was 1.4 million. Skin changes. My skin was beginning to turn a strange grayish blue color. And we were still left to wonder why. But Dr. Kenton unfortunately told me that he would not be able to treat me because he was getting ready to go to Atlanta to do medical research at Morehouse. He would no longer be there. He referred me to an oncologist at Lankenau and a neurologist at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore that would work together. And he would stay in touch the best he could. They maintained his diagnosis for about 2 months and then suddenly decided that I had something else, that I had an autoimmune disease for whatever reason. Another acronym, CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. They began treating me with steroids and with a blood cleansing treatment called plasmapheresis. And I did that for about a year. It was very, very hard to tell. You can imagine my husband being a doctor asking all the right questions, but it was difficult because anybody who has taken steroids or knows anyone who has, you know that sometimes they mask your real feelings. Sometimes steroids make you feel like you're getting better and you're getting stronger and things are just wonderful, and then you take a nosedive. So we were struggling with that. We struggled for about 2.5 years. Then I got very, very ill. At that time I was in a wheelchair, couldn't walk across my kitchen floor. I had to leave work because my vocal cord was paralyzed. I couldn't project my voice, starting to get into my internal organs, couldn't digest. And we decided to go to the Mayo Clinic. There was a wonderful little Italian woman there who had written the standard of care for poems. And that's what my local gastroenterologist thought I had all along. She did a week of testing. I got everything I had and some new tests every day for 1 week until Friday. We reported to her, and she said pretty matter-of-factly to me and my husband, well, you got poems. You had it all along. It is shutting you down. But I think I can help. I think I can get you almost back to 95% with a bone marrow transplant. Well, we were shocked and we were relieved. And I wasn't strong enough for the bone marrow transplant at the time, so she sent me home to get massive doses of chemo to clear out those bad cells and to build up my pulmonary, to build up my respiratory so it would be strong enough for that bone marrow transplant. At the same time, this wonderful woman who had written the standard of care for poems said, for that horrible pain, that nerve pain, I'm going to give you OxyContin. And I, right away, a little nervous, backed off. I said, you know, Dr. Dispensieri, I have addiction in my family. My father was an alcoholic, and his uncle had issues. He took he abused prescription drugs. And she said, oh, you don't have to worry about that. No worries whatsoever. You won't have any trouble. So I said, okay. So I went back home and worked on building myself up. And about a week before my 50th birthday, I had the bone marrow transplant. And I almost immediately, within 2 months, started to get better. The pulmonary, the last thing to go was the first thing to come back. My pulmonary got stronger. I was able to, within 2 months, digest food. My larynx, my vocal cord was healed, and my voice got stronger. And I finally went home after about 2 months at the Mayo Clinic. And I kept thinking, when will I'm ready to go back to work soon. They told me to wait 6 months or a year. And I remember I was on the verge of letting my news directors and my general manager know that I was going to come back in a month or so. I had some kind of strange reservation. Wasn't sure what it was. And we were taking my younger son to the airport to go to Brazil, to go to Rio. He had a roommate from UVA who wanted him to come over to Brazil to visit him. And he had gotten the time wrong, we missed the plane. And so I immediately, being the mother who fixes everything, got on my phone and found a plane in outside of Washington, at Dulles Airport, for him to connect with. And I suddenly realized that I didn't have my dose of OxyContin. And I had planned to go right back to Philadelphia, to the suburbs, and it was going to be fine. I asked my husband, what do you think? He said, let's think positively. I think you'll be okay. Worst night of my life. We drove down to Dulles. Leland got his plane. I remember I was in the back seat, covered up with a blanket, shivering, just beside myself. No pain. I don't think I knew my threshold for pain anymore, because while I was enjoying the physical improvement, getting my voice back and being able to walk without muffos, without braces, and certainly no wheelchair, and getting around and getting stronger, I neglected to take a look at that little pill, that little OxyContin that I had sneaked another one in every now and then, and that I was taking. All I knew was that I was in a plane. I was in an area where I was comfortable. But I was so uncomfortable that night that I knew I needed help. My husband had to put the child lock on because I was threatening to jump out the car. I was so fidgety and agitated. I knew immediately after we got home and he brought me down my dose of OxyContin that I needed help. And I called around and went back to the Mayo Clinic after enrolling in a drug dependency program. Was there for 3 weeks. And, I asked myself what I learned about that experience. And I guess the biggest things I learned was that you must be an advocate for your own health care. You must reach out. You must study, research, look up things. Don't depend on the doctor to have all the answers. Some of the smartest doctor, and that doctor who saved my life later told me how sorry she was. And she didn't realize that someone as educated as me, who was married to another doctor, could become addicted to OxyContin. She actually told me she didn't realize. And I had an inkling. I had some education because of my father, but I realized then how important it was to be your advocate for your own health care. I realized then that each of us has a right to a happiness that transcends all the materialistic forces that surround us. I learned that each of us has a right to a joy that we nurture and sustain from the wellspring of our being. We must forgive ourselves. If you don't forgive yourself, an apology isn't really worth much unless you are able to forgive yourself. You must love yourself. That love has to be internalized. Those are things that I hadn't thought about before. I hadn't realized were so important, and they really are. And so as we stand here tonight, and I continue to thank God and thank for my mother who raised me as a Catholic. None of us, my brothers or I, follow Catholicism, but she laid that foundation of faith and spirituality for us. And that faith got me through all of those days when I thought that little poems just might kill me, but it didn't. I realized that God probably had another plan for me, that there was something else I could do. I realized that my young sons were right when they said, maybe I can help someone by sharing my story. All those piles of paperwork, I remember when I had to file for disability, and I had been with Bill when he was opening his medical office and wondered, how on earth will his patients be able to do this, especially the ones who lived alone? This was mind-boggling to me. But with love and faith, you can get through it. And I just want to thank you again for having me come out and share a little bit of my story. I initially wasn't going to put it in the book. I thought there has to be something private I should keep. And then I realized that my sons had lost 3 friends in 4 years to this horrible epidemic, to this horrible problem. One of those little boys was like a third son to me, coming into my house, and took his life. And I said, I wanted you to know, I wanted everyone to know that it can happen to any of us, even your little smiling news anchor woman who comes in your living room every day. Anybody can have this problem, and it's so important to deal with it. Do any of you remember the name Anita Brickman? She was our health reporter for years. The night I agreed to have my story on Channel 10, I had some doubts because when I saw their promos come on, I realized what we do in television news, how we hype news stories. And every time I heard them say, oh, we're going to have Lisa Thomas-Laury tonight, and she's got a dark secret. She hasn't talked about it, and so she's never talked about it before. And I said, oh, Lord, please, I pray that I did the right thing. And I was beginning to wonder what this was going to, but they did a lovely story, a very respectful and accurate story of what I went through. And the next morning, I got a call from Monica Malpass, who told me that Anita had lost her freshman college son that night before from an overdose. And I realized then I did the right thing. But God bless all of you, and I just wish that you would remember to be your own advocate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And as gracious as she is, she will be here for just a little bit after our presentation and answer any questions you may have. Right before we get to our keynote speaker too, we want to make sure that you do understand the beautiful memorial quilts that we have are from Angels in Motion, of those who we will never forget, who didn't quite make it, but will always be in our hearts. I also would note that the beautiful collages are depicting a beautiful woman in my life named Stephanie Waters. And she was part of DARA, and she struggled. And I was so glad that I met this beautiful soul. And I'm so glad that I still have her amazing mother in my life, who has become one of my dearest friends and taught me so much about this personal recovery process and how sometimes we don't always win. There's not always a success story, but there's always hope. And her brother, even though he also battled this disease, is still with us, thank God. So I adore this woman. She is a part of DARA, a wonderful member. She has spoken at prior forums, and I know she'll be speaking at more. I love you, Margie. I want to thank my dear friend and colleague, Judge Susan Leonard, for being here, and Greg Gifford has also appeared, who started DARA with me. He's wonderful, and he's still working on ways that we can grow DARA and expand it. Let's see, I think we should get right to it. Oh, Gary Hendler, how can I forget, because he's right in front. He always lets me go on his Clean and Sober radio program, so I thank him. He has become a major part of DARA and brought us Lisa Thomas-Laury tonight, so I can't be grateful any more than I already am, because he's wonderful. So, with that said, I want to introduce our esteemed guest, Judge Todd Eisenberg. He has been on the bench since 2015, am I correct?
January 16th.
January 16, elected in 2015, and he does some incredible work with diversionary courts, and we are thrilled to have him here tonight. Judge Todd Eisenberg.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We can do better than that. Good evening, everybody. All right, as she said, my name is Todd Eisenberg. I am a judge here in Montgomery County. Usually as a judge, I'm not used to following up on anybody else, but that was an amazing story. So I really have to say that moved me and what I see every day in the courtroom. Actually, like you, I wanted to be in television news, and you wouldn't remember me, but I interned at WPVI 28 and 29 years ago with Gary Papa. And I have to tell you, Everybody in that newsroom, Lisa Thomas-Laury, Jim Gardner, they were all really, really nice people to someone like me who was a snot-nosed 21-year-old college kid. And it was really a great place. So I have to say what a nice place that was, and you were very kind to everybody there as well. So
Gary showed you a good time.
Gary did show me a good time. I am here tonight to discuss the targeted opioid phase program that we have in Montgomery County, and I'm happy to do it back here in Lansdale. Although I don't live in the North Penn area now, I have a lot of connections to the North Penn area. I was the attorney for Lansdale Borough for a time, Hatfield Township, and I lived in Montgomery Township for a while, so I have a lot of connections here. And I love Upper Gwynedd, Towamencin, North Wales Borough, and Hatfield Borough, so I think I got it all there. But what we're seeing here in Montgomery Township and Hatfield, we've been seeing all over the county. And this terrible opiate disease is taking away way too many people. And as a court system, I'll digress for a second. When I started practicing law over 20 years ago, the way the system worked was if you were arrested and you were an addict, we were going to put you in jail, you were going to go to jail, and that's how we're going to get the treatment for you. And that was not successful, and it is not successful today. Montgomery County has actually been at the vanguard of diversionary courts. Judge Stephen O'Neill, who I know, has he been out here?
He's on his way.
He's on his way?
Yeah.
Judge Stephen T. O'Neill started the drug court program in Montgomery County, and it is one of the leaders, not only in the state, but I would say in the country. Judge O'Neill knows more about drug court recovery addiction than a lot of doctors, and he has hundreds and hundreds of graduates of the program who continue to move on. Now, I don't know how familiar everybody is with the criminal justice system, but from the time you get arrested until the time we could get you into drug court or their other diversionary courts, behavioral health court. For a time, I was the Veterans Treatment Court judge, where we get treatment for our veterans. But the time more or less can take about 6 months, maybe even longer. The problem with that is everybody I'm here would realize is that if you're an addict, what is the system going to do for you in that time period? Absolutely nothing. If we can get you into the program, we can get you what you need, and you can move on with your life. So, the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts came up with this, something they were going to do in 2 counties. Montgomery County, probably because of the knowledge of Judge O'Neill, was one of the 2 chosen. That's the targeted opioid phase program. And the goal of that program was to get people from arrest. Or if we have probation violations as well, get them from the time they have violated, get them treatment. And it is a different type of program. Because usually when you have a criminal defendant who's been arrested, they see a judge once, they come back 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later. Judge O'Neill and I split it. We see these people every single day. They come into the court every day, they're tested, they get the treatment they need, they're evaluated through probation, and from the time that they get from arrest until they're ready to transfer into drug treatment court, behavioral health court, veterans treatment court, they are not going one day without checking in, doing what they need to do, making sure they're getting the treatment that they need, because we cannot allow this to happen anymore. One of the reasons why I wanted to be involved with this program is from the time I took the bench 3 years ago, I've sat in the criminal division. As I sit in the criminal division, people come in front of me, they plead guilty, I sentence them. They plead guilty, I sentence them. They go to trial, they're either found not guilty or they're found guilty, and I sentence them. And I thought, I didn't go and run for judge and try to become a judge simply to put people in jail or to do things like that. My goal was to make society better, and this is one of the ways we do it. The problem we have is that there are limited resources. I have some of my numbers here because I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to get out what's happening. We're working with Norristown Police Department, West Norriton, Plymouth, Lower Providence, and a number of district judges throughout the county. Judge Scott in Norristown, Judge Hunsiker in Norristown, Judge Rebar in Lower Providence, Judge Bernhardt in Plymouth Township, and Judge Alfarano in East and West Norriton. The goal is that anybody who can identify a person who would be able to use this program, and we're not limiting just to those parts of the county, but what we wanted to do is choose parts of the county that were closer to Norristown. Defense lawyers, the public defenders, the district judges, the probation officers are recommending people for the program. We currently can handle about 40 to 50 participants at a time, mainly because we just don't have enough probation officers to handle it. Judge O'Neill and I are happy to see more people every day if they're willing to come into the program. We've had 45 successful graduates who have now transitioned into drug treatment court or behavioral health court. The grant money that we receive helps to either get treatment for people who don't have insurance, help them transition in housing, or really any other needs that they do. Judge O'Neill and I try to counsel them on how they can move forward with their lives and how they need to be accountable for what is happening. I mean, it really is an amazing program that they have set up. Now, the administrative office of Pennsylvania courts came in and wanted to know what we were doing, and they, all right, I guess it's being recorded, but I'll say it anyway. The bean counters wanted to come in and see what was happening with the money. And they said, how are we going to be able to track your success in this program? And I said, really, there's only one way to track the success that we've had in this program. And that success is 100%. Because everybody has come through this program, not one person has died. They're all being successful in their in drug treatment court, in behavioral health court. And really, I believe this is the future of the criminal system when it comes to addiction. We have to get away from just trying to convict people, put them on probation, send them to jail. It's about getting them the treatment they need. It's allowing us to understand that this is an addiction and that we have to do things for them. This is a program similar to what Judge Duffy is doing here in Montgomery, 10 Hatfield Townships. And I'm a judge, I'm not a soothsayer, so I can't see the future. But I will guarantee you that in 10 years, programs like this are going to be the norm, not only across the Commonwealth, but I believe across the country. So, what I'm going to ask anybody here today, if you know of anybody who was arrested or has a probation violation here in Montgomery County, and you think that they would be good for this program, let us know. Really, let us know. The goal is to get as many people in here as we can. You know, unfortunately, we're at this situation. It's probably worse than it's ever been. As I said at the beginning, I've been involved in the criminal justice system for a long time. But there are treatment out there. The criminal justice system is changing, and in my opinion, it's changing for the better. So with that, I appreciate it. I thank Judge Duffy for inviting me out here today. I would also recommend you come back in a month. Judge O'Neill will blow your mind with his information and knowledge. He speaks a little bit longer than I do, but he'll give you a lot of information. But with that, again, thank you, and thank you for all the great work everybody's doing out there.
Okay. Well, I'm told to remind you that there is still food here if you'd like some. We're going to take a few minutes break, but I just want to say some closing remarks for those of you who might not be staying for the naloxone training, is that you never should forget the power of words. One thing that I have learned in court is how shocked I am that individuals are so positively affected by simple expressions such as, I believe in you, you can do this. That means so much to them, especially coming from a stranger, but I hope they realize that even though I'm a stranger, I care, I deeply, deeply care about the outcome of their lives and their cases. And I really think that if we can extend that sentiment to everyone who comes into our lives who's struggling, especially with addiction, we can just go so far. I do also believe that some of life's best solutions are making the right connections. And today we have some great resources. I ask you to go on the Facebook page. We work very hard at keeping it updated. Go on our website that we are really improving so that you have a handy dandy chart of local resources that are available to you. And also, when you say, how can I help? I don't have anyone, close to me in addiction. This is all very foreign to me. Well, here's how you can help. You are here. Knowledge is power. You are learning so that when someone does come, or a parent confides in you, a fellow parent, about what their struggles are at home with their child, you can empathize. Empathy is just such a great quality. And you can also say, I think I know some places that you can go for treatment. there's this really good website, or I went to this forum, maybe you should go to one too. We plan on expanding, and here's our exciting news. We plan on having 4 forums in 2019, something we've never done before. So in our next one in May is at the North Monco Technical Center, and we have some great speakers lined up for that. We are then going, hopefully in October, to Jenkintown, and then through Gary Handler, we hope to go to Upper Merion in November. This is Lower Merion, I'm sorry. These are things I never even comprehended when I started DARA in 2016, but because of the outpouring of support from people like you, we are revitalized and we are going to reach out to other areas. 4 out of 5 heroin users started out with a prescription, but yet 15 Pennsylvanians die every day from addiction. So even though I know we're making some strides here, we still have so far to go. So spread the word, please, back to how you can help. Carry naloxone. Be that lifesaver on the street. Spread the word that stigma has no place here in our community because we know better. We know that it's not a moral failing. We know that it's a disease. We know that it's a problem, but it's a problem we can conquer through understanding. So thank you all for being here. I'm so proud because all of our police departments in Montgomery County do carry naloxone, and I can thank my husband, as when he was the president of the County Chiefs Association, did initiate that movement, and you can carry it too. So for those of you who are staying, we're only going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we have Bob Oldfield from Kaleo who's going to be explaining to you how we're giving you the naloxone and how to use it. So I thank you truly so much from my heart for being here. This has been an amazing, amazing night. Thank you.